And then meanwhile, in terms of the war in Ukraine, I mean, I've been warning about this for 2.5 years, how dangerous the situation was. And that's why we should have availed ourselves of every diplomatic opportunity to make peace. And we now know, because there's been such universal reporting, that in Istanbul, in the first month of the Ukraine war, there was an opportunity to make a deal with Russia where Ukraine would get all of its territory back. It's just that Ukraine would have to agree not to be part of NATO, would have to agree to be neutral and not part of the Western military bloc that was so threatening to Russia. The Biden administration refused to make that deal. They sent in Boris Johnson to scuttle it. They threw cold water on it. They blocked it. They told Zelensky, we'll give you all the weapons you need to fight Russia. Zelensky believed in that. It has not worked out that way. Ukraine is getting destroyed. It's very hard to get honest reporting on this from the mainstream media, but the sources I've read suggest that the Ukrainians are losing about 30,000 troops per month. And that's just KIA. I don't even think that's wounded. That on a bad day, they're suffering 1,200 casualties. It's more than even during that failed counteroffensive last summer that Ukraine had. During that time, they were losing about 20,000 troops a month. So the level of carnage is escalating. Russia has more of everything, more weapons, more firepower, air superiority, and they are destroying Ukraine. And it's very clear, I think, that Ukraine, it could be in the next month, it could be in the next 2 months, it could be in the next 6 months, I think they're eventually going to collapse. They're getting close to being combat incapable. And in a way, that poses the biggest danger, because the closer Ukraine gets to collapse, the more the West is going to be tempted to intervene directly in order to save them. And that is what Zelensky was here in the U.S. doing over the past week, is arguing for direct involvement by America in the Ukraine war to save him. How did he propose this? He said, we want to be directly admitted to NATO immediately. That was his request. And he called this the victory plan. So in other words, his plan for victory is to get America involved in the war and fighting it for him. But that is the only chance Ukraine has. And it is possible that the Biden-Harris administration will agree to do that, or at least agree to some significant escalation. So far, I think Biden, to his credit, has resisted another Zelensky demand, which is the ability to use America's long-range missiles and British long-range missiles, the Storm Shadows, against Russian cities. That is what Zelensky is asking for. If Zelensky wants a major escalation of the war, because that is the only thing that's going to save him, save his side and maybe even his neck personally. And so we're one mistake away from the very dangerous situation that Chamath and Freeberg have described. If a President Biden, who is basically senile, or a President Harris agree to one of these Zelensky requests, we could very easily find ourselves in a direct war with the Russians.
The waltz into World War III is what it should be called.
And the reason why this could happen is because we don't have a fair media that's fairly reported anything about this war. I mean, Trump is on the campaign trail making, I think, very valid points about this war, that the Ukrainian cause is doomed and that we should be seeking a peace deal and a settlement before this can spiral into World War III. That is fundamentally correct. But the media portrays that as being pro-Russian and pro-Putin. And if you say that you want peace, you are basically on the take from Putin and Russia. That is what the media has told the American public for 3 years.
The definition of liberalism has always been being completely against war of any kind and being completely in favor of free speech of all kinds. That's what being a liberal means. We've lost the script. And I think that people need to understand that this is the one issue where if we get it wrong, literally nothing else matters. And we are sleepwalking and tiptoeing into a potential massive world war.
Jeffrey Sachs said it perfectly. You don't get a second chance in the nuclear age.
You don't.
All it takes is one big mistake.
You do not get a second chance. And for me, I have become a single issue voter. This is the only issue to me that matters. We can sort everything else out. We can figure it all out. We can find common ground and reason. Should taxes go up? Should taxes go down? Let's figure it out. Should regulations go up? Should regulations go down? We can figure it out. But we are fighting a potential nuclear threat on 3 fronts. How have we allowed this to happen? Russia, Iran, China. You cannot underestimate that when you add these kinds of risks on top of each other, something can happen here. And I don't think people really know. They're too far away from it. They're too many generations removed from it. War is something you heard maybe your grandparents talk about now, and you just thought, oh, okay, whatever. I lived it. It's not good.
Chamath, you're right. I mean, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, all of America was huddled around their TV sets, worried about what would happen. There is no similar concern in this day and age about the escalatory wars that are happening. There's a little bit of concern, I think, about what's happening in the Middle East. There's virtually no concern about what's happening in Ukraine because people think it can't affect them, but it can. And one of the reasons it could affect them is because we do not have a fair debate about that issue in the U.S. media. The media has simply caricatured any opposition to the war as being pro-Putin.
So I would say that when every pundit and every person in a position to do something about it says you have nothing to worry about, you probably have something to worry about. And so when everybody is trying to tell you, everybody, that this is not a risk, it's probably a bigger risk than we think.
Yeah, they're protesting too much. How can you say it's not a risk?
Me think, thou doth protesteth.
All right.
All right.
Love you, boys. Bye-bye.